Welcome back to Leap Into Business, Season 2, Episode 2. Same hosts, different table though, Lawrence.
Different
right?
table. I'm digging a round table though.
Digging a round table is nice.
I'm digging a round table a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about this.
Perfect.
Season
I am
2.
too. I'm going to finish my little intro,
Do your
though,
thing.
Lawrence.
I'm
Okay.
sorry. I always do that.
And,
I always
you know,
do that. I'm
and
sorry.
don't forget, our School of Business here at Lehman is the only school of business at a public institution of higher education in either the Bronx or in Westchester.
Yep.
Lawrence, you want to bring in our
Absolutely.
guest?
Esteemed guest.
Esteemed guest today. There we go.
Guest. So I want to introduce the audience to Gregory Hernandez. I'm going to SUNY alum, so Binghamton is in the house, so we appreciate that. Gregory is the CEO of Green Canvas, and he'll talk a lot about that, and the executive director and president of Bronx Cinema. And what this podcast is aimed to do, Sean, is to not only jump into the things that you do, Gregory, but also to the business side of the house. Mm-hmm. So you'll be talking to our audience, which are business students, but the Lehman as a whole and the community abroad. So we're happy to have you. I'm going to start off with the first question and talk to me about how your education got you here.
Certainly. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here as a Bronx native and resident. So how did my education get me here into film, television, video production, and now running a nonprofit? I made the decision in college, much to the chagrin of some of my peers, to just pursue the art. It's like, how are you going to make a living if you're pursuing creative writing, English with a concentration in creative writing, and then a minor in theater. And I took some cinema classes. What are you going to do? Are you going to go into education? Are you going to become a teacher? And it's like, well, I want to become a filmmaker. I want to become a storyteller. That's quite vague. How are you going to make a living off that? But I decided to take that path on. I had a copywriting job out of college, full-time job in pharma advertising. Lasted just under 6 months because I couldn't do it. Best quit ever.
Best quit ever.
And then after that, I got bit by the bug. I started freelancing in the film and television industry, and now that was 11 years ago, and here I am now.
Excellent stuff. So the arts, right? In physical media, digital media, dance, ballet, music. It's always a very personal, right? Industry. And how has your approach or your idea creation process changed, right? Right from that, first day, moving into the art world and doing so from behind a camera. How has your approach changed, if at all?
Yeah, I was talking to Lawrence about this on the way over here. Working on stage as an actor and also working, on stage and kind of like the crew, you get an appreciation for the art of collaboration. So if in terms of systems changing and what I look to accomplish, it's changed in the sense of how I, do things on a day-to-day basis, but philosophically it hasn't changed where I need to be somebody who's a part of a team in order to succeed. So, my friend in the cinema department in Binghamton, I graduated in 2013. He graduated a year after me. While I was on my way out, he had this genius idea at the time to combine the cinema and theater departments, which allowed us to have the practice, for those who were still in school, to work both on stage and in front of the camera and start to see, okay, how am I going to carve out my niche? What approaches will I take in my postgraduate endeavors? And this person allowed me to connect to somebody else who got my foot into the industry. He was somebody who, very intelligent person. He did not go to college. He said, I'm going to forego this. I'm going to save my money. And he started freelancing. And that allowed me to work with him because since he'd saved time of going to college, he started working in the industry immediately at the age of 18. And by the time I met him, he was already 20, I believe. And in those 2 years, he had already gone from an entry-level PA to a key PA. So for those of you who don't know, an entry PA is kind of like a unit PA, just whatever PA. But there's different tiers, and a key PA is at the top. And in 2 years' time to reach that, you're basically working with the assistant directors and the producers. And he said, "Hey, Greg, do you want to work? We're working on a feature, a tier 1 feature." Didn't know what that meant at the time, but I learned a valuable lesson. Always say yes. Yes is, but understand when to say no. So I know it's coming later.
No, I think that's incredibly important that you said it right because I'm going to say I preach, Sean. I preach at our School of Business about having 2 semesters of yes. where it's just like everything that happens for that academic year, you're saying yes to everything. Do I have to show up here? Do I have to show up there? Yes to this project, yes to that course. And I think what it does, is, especially for our students, it allows them to see what their bandwidth is, right? And then I say you do a semester of no, right? Of real calculated no's. No, I can't do it. And then that next semester is about focus. Right, about, okay, what you've learned for this year and a half, now you can focus on those things that you know you can do. So I totally agree with that just saying yes is big. I want to talk about, and again, you said we talked about this on our way over, what success means to you both as an artist and as an entrepreneur. And I know that we talked about, like, when I asked you about getting into business, you're like, look, I'm not trying to win Oscars or anything like that. I want to tell stories. I want to be really tell people stories. But I also know that the entrepreneur side has to pay the bills to an extent. Talk to me about how that success looks for you as an artist, as an entrepreneur. What does success mean to you in that space?
I mean, human capital is very important. Your reputation it has to be immaculate in the sense of people want to work with you. They want to rent from you, whether that's space or equipment, or they want to work on certain projects that you may be able to get them on. So I personally, for me, winning big awards, Oscars, things of that nature. I would love to, screen at Sundance and TIFF.
Well, yeah, of course.
And South by Southwest. But if I win awards, great. But it's more along the lines of the journey that I enjoy in being able to go from one project to the next. So if we're able to make back our money on a budget, like let's say we have a $100,000 budget and we turn a profit of $200,000, I'm like, oh my God, I can make the next one.
Right.
Or at the very least, if I decide it's a passion project, did everybody enjoy working with me and did I learn something and it will allow me to be better on the next project? And I can work with many of these same people again. That's, for me, if that keeps going, I'm going to be 35 in December. 30 years from now, I want to look back and go like,
so old.
Lawrence, come on, he's our guest. Be polite to Greg.
It's I have like interns who are like, oh, you're old, and I have like a couple
Oh,
of
no,
mentors.
you're not, bro.
Exactly, I have a
You're
couple of
so young.
mentors who are like, oh yeah, you're not even.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm
not
the
there
elder
yet.
statesman at the table, just to let you
The
know.
elder statesman.
Sean just won under 40 thing. I'm the elder
Oh, yeah, I was
statesman
gonna say, yeah.
at the table. So no, I let me go on that a little bit, Greg. So when you talked about those numbers, right, where you put 100, you throw 100,000 in, you make 200,000. It's gravy, right? When you don't, but the passion project turned out good, what happens to the people that worked on that project? Because they might all have different intentions from a business perspective. How do you manage that? Like,
That's a great question. Great example. My recent film, my documentary, 1.5 million, the literacy crisis.
We'll
in the
talk about
Bronx.
that later.
Yeah.
That was a feature. It's a feature-length documentary that was supposed to be a short. So
Right.
going into that, didn't have the budget to make this. So you just shoot, guerrilla style. You go, but you tell people up front, here are my intentions with this film, and you make sure. And this is something we can get into. The creative and the business side must align to have success. So I want to make my film. I'm going to shoot it this way. Here's my pitch deck. Here's my story. Here's my log line. But then also here's the business plan. So I think let's get to this target audience: libraries, colleges, universities, schools, young schools, things of that nature. Title I schools, I should say.
Right.
And let's get it to our target audience, and let's see where that goes. And maybe we can get distributed, maybe on PBS, CNN, and let's see where that happens. If that doesn't happen, which awards will we be able to get, like from festivals?
Right.
And which comparable films, like the LeVar Burton documentary on Reading Rainbow and
Right.
other documentaries on literacy that came out around the same time that I got mine done. And I'm like, okay, I've made the decision not to get a celebrity in this film. I've made the decision to keep it hyper-local to the Bronx.
Right.
So let's make sure we find success in the borough.
Bronx.
So if you're up front and you tell people, here are what my intentions are, and oh, by the way, remember it's a documentary, so it's going to take years to get done.
Right.
I want to make sure that they know, hey, eventually when we are done,
Right.
because I do intend to finish,
Right. Right.
when it comes to the festivals, I want you up on stage with me speaking, whether you are the composer, the cinematographer, the editor, the associate producer, what have you. So that way you have a stake in this, but also you get to reap some of the benefits in networking. And people love, the festivals and going into to the festival circuit. So, yeah.
Right. Oh, great answer to that.
No, and I think earlier you, raised a really important point, right? That obviously, right, in projects, be it a short film, documentary, or some other, endeavor, right? The end goal is important, right? Getting those Emmys, the Oscars, all the rest. Hey, ideally, right, is important, but it's really the sort of process and sort of the journey of doing that. And I know we here at Lehman always try to encourage our students to really have that headset too, right?
Yeah.
Right. That's your first project or your first short, your first documentary. Probably isn't going to go perfectly,
Right.
but if you're out there engaging and you're actively learning from the process, you ultimately end up better off.
It's a plus. Yeah, absolutely,
Right.
Sean. Absolutely.
So I'm going to pivot here, right? How do you manage that creative and business side of it, right? Because you now operate two companies, or you're heavily involved in these two companies operating in different locations in the Bronx. So obviously, all of that costs money, and we are going to get more into this later on. But the whole entertainment business has completely changed, right? Post-COVID, completely changed for any number of internal and external factors.
Right.
So on the everyday, how do you manage that? Sort of that creative interest and then the business reality.
Yeah, I mean, as an entrepreneur running a for-profit enterprise and a nonprofit, they're two different worlds, but the great thing is that they are in the same borough. They're not too far from each other. So it's about, for me, three things. It's budgeting, it's logistics, and then understanding, okay, what's the timeline here? So for me, let's go with the budgeting. Okay, if let's say my my overhead between like my living expenses, the business and the nonprofit, let's say that comes out to like 60 grand. Okay, now I know I need to make more than that to keep my head above water. Okay, the office is on Fordham Road in Grand Concourse at the Lehman College Bronx Business Tech Incubator. Thank you so much. And then I have a studio space in Port Morris. Okay, I have a car, so that's pretty easy to get to. But still, it's off the D train, so I'm on the Grand Concourse. I live in the Concourse, so I made that decision for the sake of getting now into logistics. Okay, this makes it feasible for me to do this. So I can split my time. I'm at the office 2 days a week, and I'm at the studio space about 4 to 5 days a week. Yes, entrepreneurs, sometimes you will work 7 days a week, and if you average it out, I average about 84 hours a week I work. Because it's me and one person in my company, two-person company. We have a couple of interns. And that's also, again, with budgeting and logistics. It's like, okay, on certain days, where can I be and somebody can cover me when I'm not there? So with a nonprofit, we have a larger team, but there's limited funding. And then getting into timeline, okay, when will I find success here? I want to open up an independent cinema center in the Bronx. We started in 2022. I like to accomplish things in 5 years. If it takes after 5 years, I go, something either is wrong or this is extremely difficult. The for-profit, last year was our best year. We made well over 6 figures. We had the New York Public Library as one of our clients. Now, I'm very happy, but now I'm like, oh my God, is this year going to be a down year?
Well, there is that.
So that's really, for me, the timeline is like, okay, when can I continue to make decisions to scale up, and how can I forecast certain things? Because again, as you mentioned earlier, the landscape of the film and television industry has changed significantly with COVID, with the writer strikes, and AI. So it's sometimes just keeping my head above water, and other times, where can I make certain decisions to play it safe or take a risk?
So it's almost like you had the questions before, Gregory, right? right, because that whole comment around AI, right? AI is obviously everywhere. I know AI comes up pretty much on every single podcast so far, Lawrence.
Yeah.
And there are all of the images and the memes and I think Ghibli Studio just in the last couple of weeks. So how do you, as an artist, right? As an artist, creator, filmmaker, entertainer, how do you manage that? AI and the impact that it's having on industries, right? Because on the one hand, it is easy to use, saves money, but on the other hand, that is going to impact the, let's say, profitability of more established media firms. So, how do you think about AI?
I think about it a lot, and I'll say this in 2 ways. One, if anything else, with everything that's new, you got to learn it. So I won't fear it if I learn more about it and I learn how to understand it better and how can it benefit me. I think, was it Ted Sarandos, if I'm saying his name right, the gentleman the CEO, I think, or what have you, of Netflix said, if you learn AI, then you won't be left behind. Those who get left behind are those who don't learn it. Then AI will take your job. Absolutely. So there are some, we use AI for both the for-profit and nonprofit in our meetings, with the grants, with putting together storyboards and mood boards and other things. I use it with the post-production to see how can I utilize this tool to expedite certain processes. I have found it in terms of managing it, it is quite scary because scary good, scary bad. Scary good is, this can save me a lot of time.
Right.
The bad thing is now I don't have to hire an assistant editor because this program will curate the clips and put it into bins and organize it, and that saves me money and time. But now I'm like, my God, now I will make the decision not to hire a human being.
Right.
No,
Can we stay there for a second? In your business, in that
your
art,
second's up, Lawrence, by the way.
I know, thank you, Sean. In that art, right? Isn't human beings important? Like, isn't like hiring that intern, that knowledge transfer, that whole art thing is really part of the business, is why you get in the business because of that.
Exactly.
Talk to me about like, okay, it's going to save me time and money, but it also can challenge my default system of like who I am as an artist working with another artist. Talk to me about like, is that a crossroads you get to, or how do you talk to me about how you manage that?
I mean, we talk about this with actors and editors. It's like if you use AI enough, you're teaching it because it has to learn.
Right.
And there's certain things that it's a little deficient, even in the post-production side, where I would prefer a human being like, hey, actually, this is the better clip.
Right.
Instead of this one that has a little less motion or whatever. But voiceover work, actors, it's certain things that I can do, and this has been a little bit of a controversy, I think, with Emilia Perez and the Brutalists, the recent Oscars. They used AI in some forms that where there was translation or singing that was a little like, nefarious or what have you. But it is something where you speak to people and you have a community. It's like, how do we band together to talk about this, learn together, and see how we don't essentially take advantage of people, because that's if we exploit artists, then we're losing the artistry because there's a human touch. Like, I'm not concerned about AI for writing a script. I'm worried about AI of doing that repetitive cognitive work that certain people can put their human touch on and make it better.
And their experiences, right? It almost feels like, it could. You get a little bit apprehensive because it feels like the extinction of experiences. Like our experiences are can be extinct. So I want to touch on 1.5 Million, your film, that highlights the adult literacy issue in the Bronx specifically. I always find it fascinating that the Bronx has had these outcomes. I think we were like number 62 in counties with worse outcomes. We did this for like 10 years. Health-wise, right? But we always have the first place Yankees sitting in the middle of the Bronx. And I say this, people who hear me say this all the time. It's like, if the Yankees were in last place for 10, 11 years straight, the Bronx would be on fire. Like, we just would not have the Yankees in last place. When I watched your film, it brought all of that back to like, okay, adult literacy, you're watching K to 12,
right?
And then you get into this space where you start talking about post K to 12, and you start talking about adult literacy. What brings you to that project? And you've won a lot of accolades in that project. How do you think about your next project when you have a project like that really touches? And I think, and you mentioned this earlier, I'm sure you could bring a celebrity into that space easily. This is easy pick. This is low-hanging fruit for a celebrity to get. But you don't. You go into the community, and the community are the people that are putting their hands on this stuff. Talk to me about when you get a win like this, but that is really close to your heart. It's not a win about, like, I want to be at everything, but, like, I want to bring this to the forefront. Talk to me about how you get in that project and staying true to that project.
Yeah, no, it's a great questions there. I'll start with the last one there. Essentially, you make that decision as a filmmaker, but also it's the art, but it's the business side as well. I'm not going to bring on just some arbitrary author to talk about it and then they can help sell the film. This was 2018 where I was really ramping up in production, and with social media on Instagram and things like that exploding, showing me the community activists, the business owners, the people in the community who were doing terrific things. there's no room for a celebrity. It's actually, we should be celebrating these people, these local people who are doing the bookstores, the book giveaways, bookmobiles, festivals, and fairs and things of that nature. That's what I wanted to focus on. And then you want to separate yourself, again, with the business side. Differentiate yourself from other documentaries on literacy that focus on different age ranges. I wanted to focus on adult continuing education, adult literacy, because that was something that in my research and researching the documentary wasn't really focused on. After you hit a certain age, that's it. The government's like, okay, we've done enough for you. You figure it out. But then how do you keep going? And that's something that I found very interesting because it was like a hidden epidemic. It's an invisible epidemic. It's not like obesity. It's something that's not in your face, but
and there's shame
is.
And there's shame associated with it too, right? So it's hard for people to kind of be like, I can't do this or I can't, right?
And if I'm a delivery driver or I'm a delivery person on a bike and I'm like, I can't really read this, but I kind of know
where that area.
I go, hey, am I closer? Yeah, it's over there. You can find ways to get around that. And then certain people who don't finish, and again, there's certain stats. I'll just bring up one. If the third grade is the benchmark. If you don't if you're not at your reading level by the age of 8 or the third grade, you not only risk not finishing high school, you risk even getting to high school. So it's my grandmother didn't make it past 4th grade. My parents both made it to college. One of them finished. Here I am. I finished college. So there is progress there. But for me, again, as a native of the Bronx, growing up in the poorest congressional district, which it still is, and then finding out that there were no bookstores or the last one was closing, I'm like, okay, what can I do? So I made the decision to make a documentary, and it became a kind of a time capsule project. So here's specifically what happened in the Bronx when we lost our last bookstore between 2017 and 2022 when we got it back, so to speak. 2019 is when it opened, and then the pandemic hit, and it still remained open. So we premiered in 2023. At the time, there was only one movie theater, AMC, was open, and we premiered at that same mall where the Barnes & Noble closed.
By Corp City.
So it's just very fortuitous and just, quite, important that we were able to have that venue. So that's what I focused on.
I love what you do in the film where you show a block in the Bronx, and like there was a bookstore here, then the bookstore goes, and so it's like a laundromat, a liquor store, X, Y, and Z. Like you show like how the community is being kind of transformed, right? And so the options that are open for the community are less from a literacy perspective. They're less, and all we have to do is depend on our schools, which close at 3 o'clock or whatever. So kudos to you on that, and I hope that the film continues to get notoriety and you guys continue to get awards.
Thank you. Just a quick point on that. We made that choice to do animation. Sophie Yu, who was the main editor for the documentary, there was a B-roll shot, a tracking shot where the camera moves from one side to the other on the plane. And we decided to go with animation because not only did we not want to show like which businesses or what have you, but it was more along the lines of like, let's have a different way of telling this story. So you have voiceover, you have archival media, you have the interviews, and we were like, what? It's kind of like cooking. We want another ingredient. So that's why another thing I love about film. There's so many different ways to tell the story, and to incorporate a little bit of animation, a little bit of motion graphics, just a little bit in the movie. That was great.
Right. No, good job.
So, on a quick follow-up there, Gregory, right? You, I think, mentioned the impact of platforms like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all the rest. And, as an outsider, right, to this whole industry, but as somebody who was a giant film buff, movie podcast, 10-hour videos, I'm always there, right? Outside of crypto and AI, that's
I don't know how you do
my
it,
area.
but
Love
it.
it. And so on the one hand, right, you have all of these influencer types, right? You have the Jake Pauls and Logan Pauls and Mr. Beast and other folks like that. And then over here, you have the big established houses like Disney and all the rest. How did you find your place in this sort of happy medium as somebody who isn't just posting content up on Instagram, TikTok, but is actually able to merge your creative ambitions and the business side? Rex, I know here at Lehman, obviously we do have a big focus on that experiential learning, entrepreneurial activities, and our media and arts departments are also quite big. So if I had to ask you for any piece of advice or insights, right, for any students, right, that are trying to figure out, well, I'm interested in media, I enjoy posting on Insta, TikTok, all the rest, but how do I get it up to that next level?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it has to be twofold. One, what do you enjoy learning about? What are you curious about and want to get better at, or just really want to learn more about? And then, number two, what are you comfortable with sharing? So if you're going, because you have to make it personal, and then people need to, people always say like, I want to be authentic. Well, how do you be authentic? Like you're going to need practice to speak on camera and practice get your stuff out there, but it's going to take time. But more importantly than time, it needs to be something where it's something that you really enjoy, so you can be consistent, and that will allow you to eventually get those numbers up there. So in terms of getting in the middle of like those two big machines, whether it's the old guard and like the new media influencers. I've carved out my niche because I've decided to stay local, talk about things that I enjoy, filmmaking, equipment, film, television, things of that nature. And it's something where I've sought out to make sure that if I have a studio space in Port Morris, I want it to be open to the community so others can come in and learn with me, and I can thus learn with them. So in terms of any advice, I would say, again, you have to decide, okay, which platform am I going to focus on more? What am I going to be talking about? But first and foremost, what do I want to learn? What am I curious about? And what do I feel comfortable sharing? So that way others can go, oh, my, you're talking about this specific thing like tap dancing that I didn't know anything about. And now it's like, you talk about that so much, it's like, oh my God, I love watching these tap dancing videos. Why do you watch that? Because the person's so enthusiastic and fun in talking about it. And now I've learned about it. And thus, I find it interesting.
And it's also that person to person.
Yeah.
Right. It's that, it's that connection.
Much harder to do with AI only.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Gregory, you talked about, I want to make sure I heard this right, but you talked about putting in about 80 plus hours a week, right? From a filmmaker's perspective, is that your mind is just going like, I got an idea, write it down, got another idea, I want to piece these things together. Talk to me before I ask you this question, because it ties into this question for our students. Talk to me about what are your daily habits, right? So like I am a big believer in routines are more important than goals. Just me. That's my personal experience. Some people think, for me, it's like if I can stay on routine, the goals will actually come, right? I can make a goal, but if I know I got my routines.
Exactly.
What do you do? How do you restore your energy? How do you get 80, you put 80 plus hours in this week. You got another week that you got to do stuff. What would you tell students that are putting in that kind of time? How do you restore your energy? How do you get your battery recharged?
Burnout is a big thing. Some people, it's too much work, I'm working a lot. I think systems are very helpful, and setting boundaries. So that's with friends, with family, clients, mentors, mentees, interns. I tell people, only text me between these hours these days. Something I used to do, but I let go of, but I just tell people now. I used to have an email auto response where it's like, thank you, I will get back to you in like 2 to 3 business days.
Right.
Okay.
Just give me some time, because it's important. Like, I don't want to say yes or no. Just hold up a minute.
Right.
And then I regulate with systems in terms of on certain days, like Thursdays I'm doing bookkeeping.
Right.
Fridays I'm like going through like any content I have for next week, kind of like a meal prep. I'm like, I want to make sure anything we have to edit for next week, I want to get that out. I have a calendar for social media. So if I have an intern, a marketing intern, I'm like, okay, I want to make sure on these 2 days we're posting these clips, and then let's do a recurring like idea thing. And then Mondays and Tuesdays I might be doing prospecting. So I might be on emailing, LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and things like that. So those little things help out. And then the rest is just, let's go. Like punch up time, like
doing the work.
Yeah, like get some more
Wow.
tea, stretch. Take a quick. Breaks and snacks are very crucial. It's so helpful.
Bro, when you're in your 30s,
God.
the snacks, when you're in your 30s, the snacks can work. I'm just telling you.
sorry.
You got to exercise too.
Nuts and berries, trail mix.
Peloton or some weights.
Peloton or weights. But he's also doing nuts and berries. I mean, he's
Nuts and berries.
He's in great shape.
That's a healthy snack. It's not like he's eating a bag of
Ginger.
Doritos.
No, he's doing his thing. But I
That
mean,
vending machine, I go like this.
yeah, you got to turn.
Excuse me, can't even see that.
But I mean, we're doing 80. We're talking a lot of time. We're talking a lot of time. And I know, when you find your craft, I mean, I tease Sean about this all the time is because he puts in those kind of numbers too, right? And especially in his crypto space and movie, but the whole thing. And so I'm always, when I ask Sean how he does it, is Red Bull and something else.
Oh, yeah, we walked
that's
in.
Sean,
Yeah.
That's
the
Sean's
secret
thing.
sauce, yeah.
That's his
They
secret
had
sauce.
it outside. We were coming in.
Yeah. So that's why I asked you the question is how do they get disciplined? Because you obviously are in your passion.
Yeah.
Period, right? And to be in your passion as your vocation, it's almost like that is your vacation too, all the time. Your vocation is your vacation. You're doing it all the time. And so for students who are trying to find their passion, I appreciate you just talking about like you have a system, right? And I assume that it took some time to build that. It doesn't automatically come, right? Yeah. You're kind of testing this works, this doesn't work. So I totally appreciate that you kind of laid that out.
Thank you. And really quick, this is like a business joke. I can't do a 40-hour 9 to 5, but I'm gladly work for myself for 80 hours.
Yeah. No,
Because
that's
I love
I've seen
I
that
think
quite a few places.
yeah. And as an entrepreneur, I mean, you're everything.
Yeah.
From housekeeping, public safety, you're doing everything, watching everything, doing everything, making CEO decisions. So yeah, I think that putting in that time is a lot, but you have bells and whistles in place to make sure that you can come up to breathe and recharge your battery. So good stuff.
So I just want to follow up really, really quickly Greg, before we hop into our next question. Having a process, a system, like a framework is super important, right? You do it, Lawrence does it, I do it. Yeah. But there are some times where either a emergency comes up or a great opportunity comes up, right? How do you balance those, opportunities that you have to answer right away or to prioritize? How do you balance that and try to keep everything else running, right? Because in any entrepreneurial business, there are going to be opportunities that are either really good or something that is very urgent that you have to deal with right now. So how do you balance those things and keeping flexibility, basically?
I think that's the operative word, flexibility. Yeah. For instance, last week a client came to us and said, "Hey, I want to do this Fortune 100 company. I want to do this stuff. I want to do like a commercial. I want to do this." And I'm like, "Okay, great. Here's a client form. Fill this out, and then let us know if you want to go with a consultation."
Right.
And this could be something big. So while you're doing that, let's talk internally. Let's see. Okay, this could be
exciting.
And then the person comes back a few days later and says, "Hey, we have to put this on hold right now because something else came up." And it's like, all right, let's but we stop for a moment. We're like, let's stop. Let's talk. You spend 2 to 3 hours. You can spend days on a proposal, on a pitch. You can spend 2 to 3 hours just like in a brainstorm meeting. Like, okay, here's how we would, approach this. But you have to know risk versus reward, but also like when can you quickly identify an opportunity?
Right.
So again, like if someone wants to book time with me to discuss a project, that's exactly what they have to do. They have to book time. So we have a form on our website, and on that is a key question: is your budget under or over $5,000? Because I want to know, are you worth my time to stop everything and put more time on you, because that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to have to allocate time from something else and reallocate it to you, take time away from something. So I can work 12 to 14 hours on something, but if I'm all over the place, then that's where I have to stop and go, okay, I'm working on these 3 things today. I'm doing prospecting, I'm working on a grant, and let's say I'm working on this client edit. Those are the only 3 things I can do today. Tomorrow I can then shift to like social media, work more on that client thing, and then maybe finish up prospecting. But things happen where everything's kind of thrown out of whack, and I have to say, all right, we're going to spend more of our bandwidth and energy on this particular thing because it's worth the reward. And sometimes you guess wrong. Other times, like New York Public Library the last couple of years, that was great. But this particular client would have been great if it went through, but unfortunately they said no. So you just have to make the decision, and then hopefully you trust your intuition that you've gone in the right direction. and then that way you can actually,
Right.
It'll pay the dividends.
Yeah. So I'm going to pivot right here because obviously we've been having a conversation about film, about budgeting, entrepreneurship, which I do want to have you back on to some follow-up questions about how the film business actually works from the financial point of view. Because that's super interesting. But is there a passion outside of work? Although probably not if you're putting in 84 hours a week. Is there a passion outside of work that you have that might surprise people?
I think it's two things. Well, maybe one's not a little less surprising. I enjoy the outdoors, so I like hiking. So that's something like I'll just find time because I have a standing desk, but I spend a lot of my time sitting or just in a sedentary position. So I need to be active. Second thing that might surprise people is I do like plants. So I have plants in the studio. I have plants at home. I like to feel the dirt in my hands. And I'm not saying I have a green thumb. Like I learned from a neighbor in my building and my mother. I'm like, oh, should I replot this? Should I do this?
Right.
You're like, what kind of water should I do? What angle is? So I'm still learning. I'm like, what kind of plant food should I have?
Right.
Should they have 3/4 sunlight here? So these are things that I'm still learning, but I enjoy. And when I see my plants going, I'm like, oh,
That's it.
Having your feet in the dirt, having your hand in the dirt, and touching the plants. I'm not religious. I'm secular, but I don't denigrate others' beliefs. But I do have a nice belief where I touch certain plants. There's energy there. And I'm like, so that's something.
Wow.
Maybe quirky.
No, it's interesting. I love it.
I have my mom has a plant that's like kind of like a good luck. She's like, if you're having a bad day, come visit, and touch your plant.
Right. Love it. Okay. We are at the final and last. I thought about Sean. I'm going to tell you this.
Yes,
seriously.
Lawrence. We go through this every episode.
I
Greg.
thought
You
about.
always have some little
seriously.
thing here at the end. Okay.
I thought about giving you this question for like season 2, like turning over question 10 to you for season 2. But then I said I'll wait till season 3.
Season 3.
Yeah, I'll just wait till season 3. Right.
Yeah.
We'll debate it in season 3.
We get the corporate sponsors coming in.
We get the corporate sponsors coming in.
God,
Absolutely. Greg, this is our last and final question, but this is a question that we ask all our guests. There are 3 metaphorical bones in business. There is your backbone, which is your decision making. There's your wishbone, which is your luck or serendipity, and then there's your funny bone, which is your sense of humor. We know that you've outlined in detail for us in this podcast that you use all 3 of these business bones. Which one are you just most comfortable with in that space when you're doing your thing?
It's definitely the first, the decision-making bone, and I think it impacts the next 2. Because, again, like the example I had earlier with that client, who knows if we said, because we're quite busy, but at the same time, as busy as we are, you don't want to turn down clients.
No.
So you make the decision, okay, let's go through this process. So we spent, some could look at this as a loss, 2 days, let's meet, okay, great, here's our proposal, great, you fill out the form. And then nothing came of it. Yeah. So then it's kind of like, 2, maybe 2.5 days that, we didn't make any money. We put time in and, we're not in the business of making proposals. But I made the decision, let's do this.
Do it.
And then, it didn't work out. But if it did, then I'd be looking like, hey, we were lucky or this was good. It was serendipitous.
Right.
And then if it turns out that, let's say something bad happens where this client is a nightmare client.
Right.
But, if you have a nightmare client, as long as the budget's high.
Hey, that's the real entrepreneur
right
right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the clip. That's the clip for social media. TikTok right there.
If you're a bad client, you better have a lot of money. If not, it's like, what? Then you're looking at this at the end. You need to have a sense of humor to release that in a positive way. Like, all right, that didn't work out.
Right.
It's like, oh, that was great. It's like, wow, I learned a lot, and you can laugh. You got to laugh at yourself. I think it's a quote. It's easier to be angry than sad because sad that means you have to look in the mirror.
Right. This is true.
Angry, it's like, oh, bye mirror.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want to
That's
face my
very
problems.
true.
So decision making, as a head, you have to have that responsibility,
Right.
And you can definitely have decision fatigue, and that can impact certain things. Where like, oh, I don't want to do this. I'm big on energy, so you put that out there, it could have certain ramifications. But ultimately, I think this is a referendum on our economy and capitalism as a whole, and more people are starting businesses because they want to make decisions for themselves. So I enjoy that freedom as an entrepreneur and that responsibility that comes with it, to make my own decisions that have an impact on myself and others who work with me because I care for the people that I work with, freelancers, and then the one person I have on payroll outside of myself, and it's something where I like that I have the freedom to choose who I work with.
Right. No, I love that. I'm gonna splurge a little bit, Sean, on question number 11.
11.
I know
It's an
not even
unlisted question.
I know. I got.
Oh,
Going
I don't
off
see
the
10
script,
here.
we almost got it.
Yeah,
almost
so
got through the whole episode.
I
without
noticed
going.
the sound guys are gonna be pissed off with me. I see them already.
I think one's leaving.
Yeah. So we come from this space of we ask for forgiveness. We don't really ask for permission. So I'm just going to ask for forgiveness for this 11th question. But we were talking off camera, off air, the three of us and our guys. We were all talking about documentaries. What's your North Star for a documentary? Not necessarily like from 2 points. From a technical perspective, I love the way they work with this camera. I love the way they tell this story. And then this could be the same documentary or a documentary that you just was stuck and you was mesmerized by like what the story was being told. So it's a question about the technical part of it. Like what was your North Star? Like that's why I want to be in film. And then the emotional part of it, what has kept you in your seat? Like I can't stop watching this story.
I would say Hoop Dreams is the one that comes to mind.
Oh, that's my thing. Hoop Dreams.
That's for me one of the documentaries I saw when I was a student.
That was a Spike Lee. Was that Spike Lee? No, that was Hoop Dreams. Tell me.
I forget the director, but
we'll look that up.
What stuck with me most is the story behind it.
Yeah, I got my Hoop Dreams wrong. I'm feeling like that.
was Spike Lee.
Yeah.
Don't know.
Was it
Mrs.
Spike?
Lee? I don't know if it was.
We might
look it up.
We got a
Jamie.
We got a Cracker Jack. We got our Cracker Jack team on that.
Yeah.
But Hoop Dreams.
Maybe it was. But what fascinated me with the film was the story behind it, in the sense of like the amount of hours it took, the amount of years they shot. Because I was like, oh, they made this documentary. That was great. And then hearing that it took
Steve James. Steve James.
Yeah, I thought Spike may have been involved, but I didn't think he was the director.
Right.
But just hearing that it took years for them to finish the film.
So that kept you in your seat, like
I would say that's the one that made me go like, wow, I want to get more into learning about documentaries. And this was like, again, 11, 12 years ago at Binghamton. And then a documentary I saw recently called The People's Way by a friend of mine and colleague that screened at Doc NYC last year. That's a movie that made me feel they did a great job on. It's about the protests following the murder of George Floyd. And the great thing about this film is it's informative, it's entertaining, but it's also very empathetic and emotional in a different sense of it. It kept me enthralled because it's just under 2 hours, but not only does it feel so fast, but it's something where you get to see a different insight of the people who are, as we call, activists. So what kept me on the edge of my seat or kept me really enthralled was the fact that you get to see different aspects of their lives in a unique way, in the sense of, okay, here's how we're utilizing protesting in a method of healing, not just to get our messaging out. And you're seeing the social justice, but social impact of what they're doing. You're covering it not just in interviews. You're covering it on their day-to-day, like day in the life, so to speak. And I really love that type of content where you're able to get as close to your subjects or collaborators as possible. So Hoop Dreams, because it's such a great film, and also the first time I was like, it took them almost a decade to make this one.
Right.
And then The People's Way, Doc NYC 2024.
Right. Cool.
Excellent.
Great. Well, Gregory, thanks.
Any more surprise questions, Lawrence?
No. No. I know Sean and I were talking about, I know we do this all the time. Sean and I were talking, I think yesterday or Sunday, whatever, and Sean said I might have some Marvel questions.
Yeah.
Any Marvel questions?
Oh.
So, all right, I'm gonna
put
add
you
in one last one.
Sure.
What do you think, as somebody who's made films, has done quite well in that field, right?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. On a budget that is not in the hundreds of millions of dollars, right? What do you think, right here on the hot seat, what's the future of the mainstream movie business, right? Because as of our recording, we're April 2025, and the box office hasn't been great for the last couple of years. There have been multiple high-profile flops, right? Many of which that have incorporated AI, that have incorporated other tools like that. So how do you feel that's going to impact sort of the future of the box office and of the movie business going forward?
Yeah, I think this is something that Spike Lee talked about years back. I'm talking about gentrification in Brooklyn and film and television. It needs to be cultural. So like do the right thing. Cultural,
Right.
You know, you look at Marvel's. It had, I think it's had a great run.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, in terms of not just box office, but just being
Impact.
cultural.
The
Like,
culture, right.
oh my God, we're going to the Marvel one now.
Undeniable, right? Undeniable.
But now it's something where it's all about IP and it's the next thing. And it's like, I think it might have run its course where we're getting back to maybe not the 90s, but we're getting back to, okay, let's get into like a smaller budget range of like the 10 to 30 or 10 or 50 million, and which is still a lot of money, but
Right.
something that's not
Like an
200
A24
million.
budget.
An A24 budget. So I think we're going to get more into that where they're more personal stories
Right.
on what's going on in our world where
Right,
we can
right.
identify and really, that resonates with us versus I want to see these superheroes on blue or green screen who had to work out a lot.
Right.
And it's the same role and it's like, well, this guy's clearly getting older, whether it's Hugh
Right.
Jackman or what have you. Chris Hemsworth or what have you, I should say. I think we're getting beyond that because we might have run its course. But again, these things they go through phases. One of my favorite superhero movies, which it might be undervalued, is Spider-Man 2 because there's
Okay.
less action in that one, and it's
Yeah,
more
it's
like
more of like a personal
more
story.
of a personal story. And I
Yeah.
thought that was such a good sequel to the first one. And then of course Blade, which in my opinion
Blade.
started
Blade.
this.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah, I
like,
love
oh my
that.
God, we can make
Classic.
money off this.
Classic.
Like,
That
it
first
started
Blade movie.
Yeah, it's
iconic.
Yeah.
So I think we might get back to those lower budget films because it's something where we don't have to franchise everything.
Right.
It's okay to if it's a one-off or if it's more of a personal story and it's not something that needs to be shot. It can be shot on location. It doesn't have to be shot on green screen or a studio all the
Right.
time. And it's also something where we don't need to bring in so many actors and an ensemble cast because what drives up a budget? What drives up a budget are the actors and all of the miscellaneous costs where it's like, well, we need to transport you here, we need to shoot here. It's like, well, we already know people are going to go away from that because of the pandemic and the strikes because so many studios have opened up.
Right.
I was just recently at Wildflower Studios, the Robert De Niro studio in
yeah,
Astoria.
sure. Yeah.
They're also going to open in Newark, New Line Cinema, Marvel opening up in Newark. I think Marvel or one of the Netflix. I should
Netflix is coming down to
Netflix.
Fort Dix.
I
or
think so.
Fort Monmouth. I forget which one.
Yeah, I
we do.
know, but they're coming.
That's in Jersey. Yeah.
And then we have Lionsgate in the north, Great Point Studios,
Yonkers, right? Yeah.
in Yonkers. So it's something where not only do we have the tax incentives here, but it's something where we want to have smaller projects where
Right.
it's like, let's shoot in our studio, let's do something great. It doesn't have to be as big of a budget because I don't want to take risk right now.
Right.
People are still licking their wounds from the last few years, and I think that's got to help carve out a niche for independent filmmakers, which, again, I think the future is writing and directing. So if you're a young filmmaker, make your project cheap and see if you can make it cultural and have your target audience in place that it will resonate with, and
Right.
that'll help champion your film and propel you,
I love it.
whether getting funding or becoming a festival darling. Because last year, the most recent Oscars, you could say, were kind of a weak slate outside of maybe something like The Brutalist, because you have Nora winning 4 out of
Right.
Yeah.
so
Right.
many Oscars.
Yeah.
And then Sean Baker's talking about, full-time filmmaking. Very hard to be a full-time filmmaker.
Right.
But at the same time, it's if you are able to work on your craft and understand the business, you can say, okay, I can take a reasonable risk here and make my project worthwhile, and hopefully it does well.
Yeah. I love that.
Well said, Gregory. Love
Yeah.
it.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
definitely,
Thank you so much.
Definitely.
So, Lawrence, I think we're done.
We're done.
Season 2, episode 2.
episode
Gregory
2.
Hernandez.
Greg, thank you so much. We
Yes.
appreciate you
Thank
coming
you so much
through.
for having me. This was
Yes.
a pleasure.
This was
Great
great.
conversation.
Absolutely.
Great.
It's a blast having you on. And
That's it.
that's the end of episode 2, season 2. Every episode of Deep Into Business is on YouTube and every major podcast app.
Yes, sir.
Here we go.